Good evening, everybody. James Hancock here. I'm back to review episode 4 of The Last of Us, an episode called Please Hold My Hand. It was written by Craig Mazin and directed by Jeremy Webb, and the two of them will be writing and directing next week's episode as well, because this episode ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. It was a really short episode. When it ended, I was like, whoa! And it was right when two major characters from the game are being introduced, but I won't say a word about them for now because I know for some people that will be spoilers. However, I will be discussing spoilers from episode 4, so if you don't want to hear those revelations, go check out the episode. It was very strong. So I doubt this episode is going to generate the kind of online conversation that episode 3 did, and it wasn't as scary as episode 2. Episode 2 remains my favorite of this season. I feel like Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin are kind of the unbeatable dynamic duo when it comes to writing and directing this show. But this episode was fucking good, and it continues to be the model for how you adapt a very story-driven video game into a show. And a bunch of great beats from the game made it into this show. I'll get to all that in a bit. But as far as this show being a great adaptation of a game is concerned, I'm actually working on a video right now of the top 10 games I would recommend to be adapted in a similar fashion, and hopefully I'll get that up either tomorrow or Tuesday. But full disclosure, I've been kind of obsessing over this show the last few weeks, and I've even found myself watching highlight reels of some of the most violent sequences from the first game just as a way of kind of scratching my itch in between episodes. And goddamn, it kills me that I never played this game due to being an Xbox guy when this game was a PlayStation exclusive. But the cinematics are great, the highlights are great. It looks like I missed out on one of those once-in-a-generation video game experiences. But this show is turning into a pretty impressive standalone entity of its own. HBO announced the other day that this show is part of a major ongoing hot streak where they have 4 shows right now that are currently averaging 15 million viewers per episode if you add them up across all platforms. And that includes The White Lotus, House of the Dragon, Euphoria, and The Last of Us. And I said it last episode, and I'll say it again, even by HBO's lofty standards going back to the late 90s when The Sopranos kind of changed the whole TV landscape forever, even by HBO standards, they're doing really well right now. And if you think about it, just those 4 shows, each one of them is a completely different genre. Each one of them has a completely different style and tone and sensibility. I wish there were a movie studio out there that could make as wide array and a strong slate of movies as HBO currently has going on with their shows. And for whatever reason, Succession is not as popular as those, but I think Succession's pretty goddamn good as well, and I can't wait for season 4 next month. Now, over the last week, I've been watching a lot of videos about this show, and a lot of people are talking about what the future might hold for this show, given that we already know the story from Game 2. And a lot of people have some very strong recommendations about how to possibly veer away from that game because that game was very controversial. But some people felt like it was one of the best games ever made. But I feel like one of the main strengths of this season so far is that it has remained true to the game, and I feel like if they start screwing with the story of the games, they might find themselves up to their ears in all kinds of other problems. So I feel like even if it turns into like a Red Wedding times 1,000, I feel like they should just adapt the second game into the second season, just ride the whirlwind, and we'll all have fun talking about it. But let's dive into this specific episode. And it makes me sad that we are nearly at the halfway point of this season, but I feel like we finally broke through this episode when it comes to the relationship of Joel and Ellie. And there was some tension, there was some bonding, there were some jokes, and that surrogate father and daughter relationship that people responded to emotionally from the first game is alive and well. And a lot of it revolves around gunplay and learning how to use weapons effectively and what are the consequences of using weapons. And we open with Ellie looking in the mirror, almost like Travis Bickle style from Taxi Driver. And it was great. She's kind of testing her 2 different eyes because for people who've never shot before, everybody's either right eye dominant or left eye dominant. And when I go hunting, I'm always like, do I aim better? With which eye do I aim better? The reality is I don't aim well with either eye, and I try to keep both eyes open. But anyway, I've never been particularly accurate with firearms, but I just found that moment to be Very relatable. But we learn that she has inflicted violence on people in the past. She's forced to save Joel's life this episode by shooting a guy who begs and pleads for his life afterwards, but Joel finishes him off. We learn that Joel has his own history of violence where in the 20-year interim, during the chaos after the initial outbreak, that Tess and Tommy and Joel, they found themselves on both sides of ambushes, making a lot of morally dubious decisions, and everybody was just trying to survive. And it just shows how you don't get far in this environment, or at least you won't live long if you're not willing to cut some corners. And it's just a battle for survival no matter what happens. And it's awful no matter what you do. And as Joel very eloquently puts, all you can really do is just fight for your family. And while Ellie's not family quite yet, she's still being referred to as cargo, but we can see how they are rapidly forming that father-daughter bond. And I think my favorite moment all episode, perhaps all season, is when they slow down and he teaches her how to hold her weapon properly. And I feel like, teaching people or giving people the skills that they need to survive in this world, that is a wonderful, beautiful gift to give. But let's slow down. I'm kind of jumping all over the place. Let's go sequentially. So early on, I was just in awe of how haunting and beautiful this show remains. Just when you see the moss-covered buildings and you see how Joel's giving her the lecture about how most gas has just been broken down now and it's almost water now. And I love how he's trying to explain the physics of siphoning gas and he doesn't quite know how to say it, but it's like, it works, which once again, a great dad moment. Dads don't need to know how things work. They just need to know that they do work. And then we got a little taste from the original game. They play the the song "Alone and Forsaken" by Hank Williams and the Drifting Cowboys, and I believe that song was the Hank Williams tune that was used straight from the game. But damn good tune. I mean, I love Hank Williams. I'm not an expert, but I used to have this great CD of his greatest hits back in college that I would listen to on a loop. But I feel like if there is a type of music that captures the personality of Joel in this game, Hank Williams all the way. And I was also excited to see the gay porn joke from the magazine made it into the show. I thought it would come at the end of the last episode after their encounter or after they raided all the supplies of Bill and Frank, because that scene came directly after the scene with Bill in the game. But I'm glad that it made it in there because this is a pretty grim, dark, relentless show. A few jokes about porn, or later the joke about diarrhea. I mean, that even Joel had to have a laugh when she asks, did you know that diarrhea is hereditary? What is the exact payoff? Hang on, I wrote it down. Yeah, it runs in your genes. Sorry, I should have checked the punchline before I tried to reminisce about it. But I like how the show continues to feed us little bits of exposition about the world without ever like totally slamming the brakes on the show for like a big exposition dump. And Joel's explaining how out in the middle of nowhere, it's way too remote for the infected or for any clickers or stalkers or runners to be around, but that you do have to be aware of people. And he says they will do far worse than rob you. And I always find that most interesting about any sort of hellish dystopian horror or sci-fi story, whether it's in fiction or in games or in movies. It's people you always have to worry about. The way people respond to a crisis can be fucking terrifying. And there's a nice, subtle, little sweet moment where we see how, in spite of Joel telling Ellie that they're fine, they'll be safe, they can sleep, after she falls asleep, he looks out into the trees, and then we cut to him standing guard with his rifle. So all these little details just kind of further cement the bond between the two of them. But we get some interesting background info about Tommy, and Joel explains how Tommy's a joiner and how during Desert Storm, he joined the army, and then after the crisis started, he joined this group heading to Boston. And so Joel joined that group basically to look after him, and that's where he met Tess. And eventually, Tommy joined the Fireflies, and Joel thinks they're a bunch of dreamers, and he wants nothing to do with them. But now Tommy's on his own, and Joel wants to go out there and get him. So clearly, Joel's main purpose in life during the crisis has just been looking after people. He looked after Tommy. Now he's looking after Ellie. But then the episode really cranks things up a notch when they get to Kansas City, and the highway is totally blocked off by this Sara Lee truck. They're forced to take a detour, which takes them through the city, which leads them into a scene that's almost done like shot for shot from the game with a few minor details where somebody's claiming to be hurt, and Joel immediately is able to read the signs, and they just blast on through. Tires get popped on nails, shootout starts, all hell breaks loose. And when Joel goes into combat, he is as cool as they come. However, he can only handle but so many, and Ellie does have to step in and shoot a guy in the back to save him. And yeah, this is a harsh world where young girls are forced to shoot people in the back. And while it's easy to assume that these guys were going to take all their belongings and flay their skin off them or rape them or whatever the case might be, as we see the situation in Kansas City is very complicated. Clearly, a very corrupt authoritarian regime has just been overthrown. Some group called Phaedra. People who know the game better than I do will have to tell me if it's Phaedra or Thadra, that's the name of the organization. But we see this character Kathleen, who was invented by Craig Mazin for the show, played by Melanie Lynskey. And she's interrogating the doctor who delivered her, trying to figure out where Henry is, because her brother was beaten to death and she is looking for payback. But quick side note for the film history nerds out there, Melanie Lynskey, I first saw her in the film Heavenly Creatures back in 1994, which is a movie directed by Peter Jackson. Long before he was doing The Lord of the Rings, he was doing all kinds of movies, like splatter movies and fake documentaries and that sort of thing. But Heavenly Creatures was like his great art house classic. And if people have not seen it and you like Peter Jackson, definitely hunt down Heavenly Creatures. Also worth noting, the doctor who delivered her is played by John Getz, and for people who were alive back in the 80s, you will remember him from David Cronenberg's The Fly, as well as the Coen brothers' debut feature film, Blood Simple. But he's getting a little up there in years these days. However, he remains a damn fine actor, but it's always a pleasure seeing him get some work. In any case, if you look at this whole situation from Kathleen's perspective, she's doing everything in her power to do right by her people. Obviously, they suffered under the previous regime, whoever was in charge, and she thinks that these newcomers who just took out 3 of her guys must be people who were called in to help Henry. And then the whole episode almost turns into like a Mad Max movie with these armored trucks on the loose, like just bulldozing around, looking for these, they think they're mercenaries who've been called in to take them out. And we see that Kathleen is sitting on a very large problem that's about to get considerably worse. And as I was watching the episode, I kept saying to myself, I really hope we see a bloater this episode. And if you don't know what a bloater is, well, watch a few highlights from the game and you will learn all about stage 4 of the infection and how terrifying and how strong and how impenetrable and unkillable a bloater is. But when I saw that cracked floor, concrete heaving and swelling, it's like, well, there's only one thing that's going to be strong enough to make a floor move like that. And sure enough, in the teaser for the next episode, we see that shot from the trailer of that fucking bloater rising out of this pit with flames behind it. I mean, if anything, it seems like in the show, the bloaters are even bigger and stronger than in the game, but I can't fucking wait to see how Joel and Ellie respond to an honest-to-goodness bloater in the show. But as Kathleen and her people are looking for Henry and Sam, we get a few little details. They find their hideout in this attic with all these empty cans of food, and they've run out of food. But there are a couple of pictures of the father and the son who are obviously flying together and that sort of thing. So clearly, they're not like these crazy, evil savages or whatever. And that's probably all I can say about Henry and Sam for now, but obviously we're going to be learning a lot more next episode. But meanwhile, Ellie and Joel are doing everything in their power to get to higher ground so they can try to figure a way out of Kansas City, just get the hell away from all these gun-wielding lunatics. And even in spite of their precautions, laying down some broken glass, as Ellie points out, Joel's hearing on his right side is not the best from so much gunplay, and he sleeps right through his little precaution, and they wake up with Henry and Sam putting their fingers through their lips, but also holding them up at gunpoint. I feel like, it was a great little cliffhanger, and next fucking episode, I'm sure it's going to be guns a-blazing, total fucking insanity, and I can't fucking wait. But I think that's all I have to say this week. I'm very eager to get back to work on my other video about the top 10 games that I would recommend to be adapted in the shows and movies, provided that they can be adapted with the same level of care and love and expertise as this show. But before I totally wrap things up, I have to share some breaking news because Manscaped, they now sell beard products. That's right. They are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using the discount code WRONGREEL in all caps for 20% off and free shipping. I'll leave a link down in the description below. So join the 7 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and check out the Performance Package 4.0. Also, a grooming routine is never complete without applying Crop Preserver and Crop Reviver before showing off your buck-ass naked, freshly shorn self. These unique formulations take care of the smelliest part of your body and are a big boost to your confidence when you are stripping down for somebody else's prying eyes. And to complete the set, Manscaped includes their Shed travel bag and anti-chafing box of briefs as free gifts to keep all your goodies stored comfortably. So that's all I've got for y'all for now. I'll be back at you in the next day or two, but I can't thank you enough for watching the video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, or making a Manscaped purchase using the discount code WRONGREEL. But thanks again. Hope y'all have a great week, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.